College Football Now by Chat Sports. Tylert Jones here. Thanks for joining us as we're talking about the top 12 potential candidates to replace Mel Tucker if he were to lose his job. Where would the university go from here? Break it all down looking at internal options as well as external options for the Spartans. Let's catch up to speed with what you need to know as we got to this point. Currently, Mel Tucker, the Michigan State Spartans head coach, is under investigation for sexual misconduct of Brenda Tracy. The accusation goes on to say that Tucker was masturbating on a phone call through phone sex without consent to Brenda Tracy, and that is at the heart of this issue. In the meantime, Tucker is suspended, not fired, despite reports to the contrary from Brett McMurphy of Action Network. Tucker is still currently employed by Michigan State while the investigation proceeds. At the time present, the interim head coach for Michigan State is assistant Harlon Barnett, holding things down while this investigation continues. And Mel Tucker is one of the highest paid coaches in all of college football. He is in the second season of a 10-year, $95 million contract. So if he were to get fired, in theory, Michigan State will try to prove cause to fire him to try to avoid paying his full contract. As this season has just begun for Michigan State, the Spartans right now sit at 2-0, and they have a big matchup coming up this weekend against the Washington Huskies on Saturday, one of the top teams in the country with a very prolific offense. So with that, let's go ahead and begin with the internal options. Of course, have to mention the interim head coach himself, Harlon Bennett, as well as former head coach of Michigan State, Mark Dantonio. And Dantonio is supposed to be playing a role within the football operations while we see Tucker away from the university. Dantonio had a very good track record with Michigan State, taking them to the college football playoff. You'd have to think if they are going to go internal, these would be the leading two candidates potentially for this Michigan State program. So let's ask you, should Mel Tucker be fired right now? Is it time for Michigan State to move on from Tucker? Weigh in. Tell us what you think. Our pinned comment today. Y for yes, N for no. Let us know what you think if Michigan State should ultimately move on from Mel Tucker or not. Now to the external replacement candidates. We begin, of course, with the one and only Coach Prime Deion Sanders, the head coach at Colorado. And while it's highly unlikely that Deion Sanders would leave a program that he just arrived to, like Colorado, for Michigan State, it is worth noting that Mel Tucker, who Michigan State is currently, of course, has as their head coach, was hired from Colorado. So we've seen this move before. I think that what you're going to see with Deion Sanders is that eventually he'll probably leave Colorado, but not for another job that's not a blue blood program. I would think that the next step for Deion is to go to one of those blue bloods, not something like Michigan State. But as far as the Colorado connection goes, one name that's being mentioned that has ties to both Deion Sanders and the Midwest is Deion's own offensive coordinator, Sean Lewis, who was previously the head coach at Kent State. He's a name to potentially keep an eye on to be a candidate for the Michigan State job if Michigan State can ultimately not land Deion Sanders. Other names to watch for. What about Toledo head coach Jason Candle? His name is being brought up and has a decent track record there with the Rockets for what he's done with that program. And some other names to get to, a more notable name of sorts. Pat Narduzzi at Pitt led that Pitt program to the ACC championship game a couple of years ago and was part of the development of Kenny Pickett, who's now the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers there. So good track record of talent. Ended up going to the Peach Bowl a couple seasons ago as well. Could be a potential name that knows how to recruit that area and has done a pretty decent job with that Pitt program. More names to get to here in just a second, but first, today's show is sponsored by BetUS. the exclusive sportsbook partner of Chat Sports. If you go to chatsports.com/bet, enter the promo code CHAT125, you can get a 125% deposit bonus. Put $100 down, you get $125 to spend for free. You can bet on college football action all weekend long, including that Michigan State and Washington game, which will be this weekend. The Huskies heavy favorites at 16.5. The over-under currently set at 57.5. If you want to bet on this game or other college football action around the country this weekend, BetUS is the place to do so. Chatsports.com/bet, promo code CHAT125 to get your bets in today. That's chatsports.com/bet, promo code CHAT125 at checkout. What's your bet going to be? Are you rolling with Michigan State or are you rolling with Washington? Chime in, tell us in the comments section which team you're going to bet with. Type MSU for Michigan State. Type WASH for Washington. Let us know which team you're picking to get the job done in that game. Another potential replacement candidate, college football fans very familiar with this name, Brian Hartline, who is the current offensive coordinator at The Ohio State, has done a really good job with that program there. And we've seen Brian Hartline, a guy that has coached up a lot of good receivers, and in particular, all eyes are on what he's doing with Marvin Harrison Jr., who's expected to be a top 5 pick in next April's draft. Another name that fans should be very familiar with is Bill O'Brien, the current offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. Before that was with Alabama as their offensive coordinator, former head coach of the Houston Texans, but also coached in the Big Ten Conference with Penn State. If you recall, he took over the Penn State program after everything that went down with Joe Paterno. He was the successor to Joe Paterno, took over just an awful situation where that team and that program was under a lot of sanctions and penalties, and morale was very low. Bill O'Brien did an incredible job taking over for Joe Pa there at Penn State. And although he didn't stay too long, ultimately going to the National Football League, there was a lot to feel good about with his track record and how well he performed with that Penn State program. When you look at Bill O'Brien, I think all of us can say he's a good coach. I mean, even in his time with the Houston Texans, he did a good job, but he didn't necessarily do a very good job as a general manager there. So with that being said, you're not asking him to be an NFL GM. You'd be asking him to be a college head coach. I think Bill O'Brien, considering these circumstances that Michigan State's in, that could be a natural fit potentially for this Michigan State Spartans team. Now, to the next 5 on the list, we turn our attention to Mike Tressel, the defensive coordinator for Wisconsin. And Tressel was in Cincinnati not too long ago as he was working with Luke Fickell, who's now the head coach of Wisconsin. And whether it was at Cincinnati or now even this short start at Wisconsin, Tressel, what we've seen is some very strong defenses in his ability to recruit a lot of really good talent over the years that have developed into good NFL players. Maybe not necessarily your 5- and 4-star guys, but taking those 3-star talents and turning them to pro prospects. I think in particular Kobe Bryant, who's with the Seattle Seahawks now, won the Jim Thorpe Award there at Cincinnati. This could be a good find for Michigan State, who maybe isn't going to get all the 5 stars, but could find a ways to develop that young talent. If you want more college football videos from Chat Sports, here's what I need you to do. Go ahead and subscribe to College Football Now by Chat Sports. Here's the deal. We're making all sorts of content here on Chat Sports when it comes to the NFL, the NBA, and college football. But we've ramped up our college football coverage as of late. And we can do even more college football coverage if you guys want us to do more college football coverage, from realignment to recruiting to the transfer portal, game previews, whatever it may be. But we need you guys to prove it and show why we should do more college football content. So here's my challenge to you. Can we get 30 subscribers off today's video? If we can get 30 subs off today's video, then I promise you we'll do more college football videos this week even. So there's the challenge to you. Want more college football videos? Sub today. Let's get 30 more, and we'll bring you more content here on College Football Now. Next on the list, we go from one Wisconsin coach to a former Wisconsin coach. Jim Leonhard, who's currently a defensive analyst at Illinois, is a name that's going to be talked about for a lot of openings throughout college football. Last year did a pretty impressive job taking over there at Wisconsin. The circumstances and when he replaced Paul Chris, who ultimately was fired midseason, and the things around that Wisconsin program, hype wasn't feeling too great, and still managed to get that team to a bowl game despite the rough start that they had there. And you talk about a guy in Jim Leonhard who is well respected. He still stuck around and coached that bowl game, even when Luke Fickell had already got the job over him. And Luke Fickell still coached even that bowl game he showed up for, and Jim Leonhard was still there. So Jim Leonhard, not only a very good recruiter and good defensive mind, but also well respected for how he handled things and how he's thought of. Jim Leonhard, a potential name to keep an eye on, obviously with some deep ties in the Big Ten Conference. Matt Campbell, head coach at Iowa State, has done a really good job with that Iowa State program. They went to the Big 12 championship game for the very first time just a few years ago, has brought in a lot of talent over the years that's turned into pro prospects from the likes of David Montgomery to Brees Hall, Charlie Kolar, and now Brock Purdy. And those guys, none of them were highly recruited by any stretch of the imagination. He's done a good job with that and recruiting in a footprint that's very familiar with Michigan State as well. There are concerns, though, that you had this recent gambling scandal. Iowa State had a down year last year. Are things sliding for Matt Campbell at this point, or will he eventually bounce back? Something to follow. Matt Campbell could be a candidate, but he's not obviously the highest on that list based on how things have gone recently for Campbell there at Iowa State. Who should be the next head coach at Michigan State? Assuming that Mel Tucker is gone, who should be the guy they turn to? Chime in the comment section. Give us a name that comes to mind that you think should take over for Sparty. A couple more names before we wrap up here. Mike Elko, the head coach at Duke. Duke pulled off a big upset just a couple of weeks ago against Clemson on Labor Day, and now all eyes are on Duke to see if they could potentially make the ACC title game. He'll be a name that should be high on a lot of lists around the country. And then Jonathan Smith, the head coach at Oregon State. Oregon State, a top 20 team in the country this year, and in the puzzle that is conference realignment, they're being kicked to the curb, essentially. Oregon State is expected to be in the Mountain West or the new form Pac-12 Mountain West merger, whatever that is, and essentially fall out of the Power Five, go to the Group of Five. And that means that Oregon State is going to see their athletic budgets really fall off the cliff. And are they even going to be able to afford to pay Jonathan Smith potentially? Here's a guy in Jonathan Smith that I think is going to have his name called a lot potentially for openings, knowing that the future of Oregon State's uncertain, that he's a Power 5 quality coach. We'll see if he could potentially end up at Michigan State and make his way to the Big Ten. Follow me on Twitter for more college football coverage. Love talking about the best sport in the world, college football, on my Twitter feed at Tylert Jones Live. You can give me a follow there, and I'll see you next time right here on College Football Now.